Some countries, they're pretty much an open book. Others give you a few questions. And then there's Germany, a place that isn't just a spot on a map, but a massive, complex historical enigma. To even begin to understand it, we've got to look for the clues. So how does that happen? How does an entire nation become such a mystery? Well, it all starts with a trail of clues, things that seem totally disconnected at first. But when you start piecing them together, they tell a much, much deeper story. A story that kicks off with a wound running right through its heart. So, our first piece of the puzzle, a city that was literally ripped in half. This was a place where brothers became strangers almost overnight, separated by nothing more than a wall of cold, hard concrete. Then we jump to a completely different kind of mystery. We're talking a fairy tale king, a castle that inspired millions of dreams, and a death that, to this day, has never really been solved. A royal secret, you could say, locked away in stone. And finally, our last clue takes us somewhere, well, somewhere much darker, deep into the shadows of an ancient forest, a place that didn't just give us bedtime stories, but something else entirely. A whole series of warnings that really shaped a national psyche. All right, to really understand this mystery, we have to start our investigation right at the epicenter. So we begin in Berlin, which was, for a long time, the very heart of a massive global conflict. For almost 50 years, this was ground zero. At checkpoints just like this one, Checkpoint Charlie, the entire world was basically holding its breath. Berlin wasn't just some city, it was the main event. The #1 case file for the entire Cold War. And the division itself, it just had this brutal finality to it. The Berlin Wall wasn't just a barrier. It was the Iron Curtain made real, made of concrete and barbed wire. It split streets, it split families, and it split ideologies, leaving iconic landmarks like the Brandenburg Gate just sitting in a haunting, empty no man's land. But you have to wonder, how does something like this even happen? Who makes the call to just draw a line through a country, creating two completely different worlds out of one? The answer to that is buried deep in the rubble of 1945. Okay, our second clue takes us away from all that political intrigue and back in time to a much more personal tragedy, one that's shrouded in myth and fog. Now, this is Neuschwanstein. Yeah, the castle that inspired Disney. It was built by King Ludwig II of Bavaria, a man who desperately wanted to create his own private sanctuary, a fantasy world to escape the pressures of being a king. But what if this fairy tale sanctuary was actually something else? What if it was really a gilded cage for a king who was declared mad by his own government, a beautiful prison designed to keep him locked away from the very world he was supposed to be ruling? And this is where the story takes a really dark turn. Before his incredible masterpiece was even finished, Ludwig and his psychiatrist were both found dead, just floating in the shallow waters of Lake Starnberg. The official story? Suicide by drowning. But the details were and still are super mysterious. Was it really a tragic accident, or was it a calculated hit? A way to get rid of a king who had become a problem? The castle still stands there, unfinished, a huge, silent monument to a case that's never been closed. From an unsolved death, we now turn to a completely unbelievable rebirth. Our third clue looks at how a nation that was in total ruins pulled off a resurrection that basically defied all logic. This right here is at the very core of the mystery. In 1945, Germany was just rubble. Cities were leveled, the economy was non-existent. And yet, just a few decades later, it was an industrial titan, a global leader in engineering. How on earth is a transformation like that even possible? Well, it actually has a name, the Wirtschaftswunder, which means the economic miracle. And this wasn't just luck. It was a combination of methodical planning, an absolutely relentless work ethic, and this precise, almost scarily efficient drive that saw a nation literally rise from the ashes to become a dominant force in the world economy. It's a huge piece of the German enigma. For our final clue, we've got to go deeper. We need to go beyond the history and the economics into the world of psychology and myth, to what you might call the source code of the German soul. Welcome to the Schwarzwald, the Black Forest. Now, this is not just a bunch of trees. It's a place with some serious cultural weight.
It's ancient, it's dark, and the evergreen canopies are so thick that they create this kind of permanent twilight on the forest floor. See, this forest is the birthplace of all those famous tales collected by the Brothers Grimm. Stories we all think we know, right? Hansel and Gretel, Little Red Riding Hood. But their original purpose was, far from comforting.
These were not bedtime stories. They were warnings, they were cautionary tales about things like starvation, about not trusting strangers, about the real darkness that can exist just off the beaten path. They give us a window into a really deep-seated part of the cultural psyche. So, now we have all our clues on the table. A divided city, a dead king, a clockwork miracle, and a forest full of warnings. So what does it all mean? Let's see if we can reach some kind of verdict on this national enigma. When you get right down to it, Germany is a nation of huge contradictions. This is the land that gave the world the incredible music of Beethoven and the game-changing philosophy of Kant, and yet it's also the nation that wrote some of the absolute darkest chapters in all of human history. The artist and the shadow, somehow living side by side.
And this building, the Reichstag, maybe says it all. You've got this historic stone building, scarred by the past, but now it's topped with this modern glass dome. And that's a very deliberate statement. It's a symbol of transparency, of being able to look right into its own government, and a promise to never ever forget the lessons of its own history.
Which leaves us with one final big question. In the grand story of the world, is Germany, with all its clockwork precision, the architect of our future? Or, haunted by its own fairy tale warnings and its divided past, has it become the world's great observer, a guardian reminding all of us of the paths we must not take? The case for now remains open.